everybody, and welcome back to the Press Break podcast on Her Hoops Stats. We are so excited to be back for another episode, and it's definitely been a wild week in women's basketball in general, not just the WNBA, not just college, everywhere. I feel like, everywhere. We're still in the in-between between the end of WNBA season and the beginning of college basketball season. But don't worry, the world has given us enough.
It's a year-round sport. It's a year-round sport.
Year-round sport. And there's never – I remember a few years ago there was the joke about, like, WNBA tea on Mondays. The Mondays are no more. It's an all 24/7 kind of deal. Yeah. So we're going to get into all of that. We're going to start off with WNBA news and then end off with college. So if you're here for some college, don't worry. We will get to that. But – the big thing this week, since the WNBA season ended last week, of course, we had a great championship celebration. The New York Liberty were living it up on the streets. Brianna Stewart was getting wine handed to her from the people. Walking
Big
around.
Ellie with Missy Elliott. Let's go.
Oh, that was so fun. We had another funny moment was her just walking around in a like very thin tank top, despite the fact that it was very cold here on the East Coast last week. So
look. When the vibes are good enough, you don't feel the weather.
When the wine
you're asking for wine to be handed to you on the float, like you have alternate ways to stay warm, okay?
Look, I don't think there was any issue with that. I'm not gonna lie. So, as it should be.
Yeah, so they definitely got their celebrations off. It was very fun to see. It was a cool parade format where they all kind of had their own floats. Their families were with them. They had a concert. They had a big celebration, so it was fun. But the other big storyline in the WNBA this past week has been the coaching situation. If you're not too in tune, there are currently 7 out of 12 teams who don't have a head coach in the WNBA right now. As we speak, this is being recorded on Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday, October 29th. Because I want to say that just because things happen so fast.
Lord knows what might happen next. Like,
literally, by the time you listen to this, things might have changed.
I might be a head coach for the W by the time we listen to this next week. I already took, but I did get my name out of the running though, officially. I just wanted to put that out there. I know all the teams were like, "Hey, him." No, sorry, I'm officially out of the running.
Yeah, so 7 out of the 12 current teams. That does not include the fact that we have 2 expansion teams coming in 2026 that still need coaches. Golden State has their coach, so that one is good to go. But 7 out of 12, which is over half of the league, there's so much movement going around. And I think it's a really important time, in the WNBA because so much is changing. And I think every one of these franchises, especially the ones who are also changing out their front office structure, we have some GM movement around, general manager movement, a lot of people switching from general manager to like more front office, like presidential kind of roles. And it's very intriguing. And to me, the idea that we're in a very transformative point of the WNBA where a lot of these franchises are realizing that you're going to have to change the way things work because the landscape is changing, the structure of the league is changing, the things that free agents want and players, the CBA is coming next year. There's a lot to think about when it comes to these coaches, because as much as it's important to get players, it's so important to pick the right coach. And a lot of them don't get a lot of time to prove themselves, as we're seeing. So let's go through, before we get into it, we'll go through the list of coaches or the list of teams that need coaches. So coaching vacancies are currently LA Sparks. They parted ways with Kurt, who had 2 years, I think. He was 2 years. Before that, had coached head coach for the Connecticut Sun. So LA doesn't have a coach. The Chicago Sky don't have a coach. They hired Teresa Weatherspoon last year for this season. She coached 1 season, and then they let her go. We'll get into that. Dallas Wings, Latricia Trammell, they parted ways. She had 2 years as a coach. It was her first head coaching gig. They decided not only to let her go, but also their general manager is moving up into more of a front office consulting kind of role. And so they're also looking for a new general manager. That's a big one. Then you have the Atlanta Dream. Tanisha Wright, that was one we predicted. It was time. Very curious because Atlanta has kind of been in this like wishy-washy state for a little bit. Very curious to see what they're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
The latest one before yesterday was the Indiana Fever. They let go Christy Sides, who had been there for 2 seasons. A little bit more of a shocking move considering the fact that she had a very new roster and all of that, but we'll get into that. There's a lot of dynamics around there. Washington Mystics, another one of those teams that also let go their general manager. It was kind of like a family affair over there. They had Mike Thibault, and then his son Eric had recently taken over. I think it was 2 seasons ago, the head coaching, and so they parted ways with both of them, which obviously makes sense. If you're going to fire the son, you kind of have to fire the dad. But so Washington, and then finally yesterday, the last one came out that the Connecticut Sun and Steph White have parted ways. That one is a little bit more intricate. She still is in contract. She's a great coach. I think there's a little bit more under that we'll get into, but those are the 7 teams currently without head coaches. I know it's a long list. I wanted to make sure we got all those names out there because there's definitely going to be a little bit of swapping going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I will throw it to Tyler first.
Okay.
What are your thoughts? And then we'll get into, let's talk about our thoughts first, and then we'll talk about who we think is going where.
Yeah.
To get into that, but thoughts.
Yeah, I think just kind of generally speaking across all the moves, I think that where people are kind of residing at when it comes to making these decisions is you want to take advantage of this boom in one of 2 ways, I feel like. You either want to be at the top or you want to be at the bottom. No one wants to be in the middle right now. And that is because either you want to be winning or you want to be drafting the players that are going to be winning you games in the future. And I think that several of these teams are trying to capitalize. Like I think Indiana, and like I said, we'll definitely get into it, but presumably hiring Stephanie White, that is a winning move. For Washington, kind of revamping everything, getting a new direction, getting new ideas in, that is a rebuilding move to me. And I think both are absolutely correct. No one wants to be in the middle. And right now, it's been interesting in the W in comparison to kind of other professional leagues, is because it's just a smaller, pool of teams. There's not much middle. 8 to 12 teams have been making the playoffs. So the idea of being able to flip a roster and revamp it into a title contender is more realistic in just a smaller league than it is in a larger one. That's just naturally speaking. So I do think it's interesting that now teams, I feel like, are, as the league expands, as drafts are, in my opinion, the talent that are coming in the draft year by year is it's deeper than it's ever been. It's changing. It's franchise changing, not only on the court, but also just like the money you can bring in off the court, with the star level, like the fame of these players.
Yeah.
So I just think it makes total sense for these teams. No one wants to be stuck in the middle right now. And I think that it seems like, generally speaking, across the board, teams had a good idea of if they felt like the coach that they had was going to be either the long-term builder or not the coach to take them to the next level. Like for Atlanta, I've been critical of Atlanta. It's no secret. And I think that they are a team that is like, we can get a coach in, we have the talent to revamp and go win a championship. I think that on paper, you can understand why they feel like they should be in the top tier of W teams. Whereas the Sky, for example, if you don't feel like Teaspoon, for better or for worse about the decision itself, if you don't feel like Teaspoon is the coach that is going to build long term, then you don't want to keep her around. Like you want to make that shift early. And I don't, the reasoning behind it or whatever, that's completely different. But if from their perspective, if you don't feel like Spoon is the one for that, same with Kurt Miller in Los Angeles. I don't think it's any secret that Kurt Miller is a good coach. For me, I wanted to see him in Atlanta to be the one to potentially take them to that next level. But if you don't feel like these coaches are the ones to either build or to elevate, there's no reason to have them stick around right now in this moment of women's basketball where it feels like there's an arms race going on and teams are going to want to hire quickly, especially as more expansion teams come in and want to get their staff set in place. So I understand the moves.
Yeah, it's funny how you say that you want to get them in quickly, and I agree. I do think one thing to note is that, we've kind of been mentioning this Indiana-Connecticut thing. the reporting going around, I think it's Annie Costabile who's doing most of it. Shout out to her, obviously.
Yeah, she's been fantastic. Yeah,
this is all of her reporting, but she has been kind of on this report where Indiana is interested in Steph White, and Steph White seems to be interested in going to Indiana for like familial ties. I think she has a lot of roots there. I think
she's born and raised there, played at Purdue, played for Indiana, had coached Indiana. Like, it is all like,
and so
it's all there.
Yeah, now with Indiana being in this situation where they have this team of young stars and they have all of this money coming in, I think if you have someone who wants to be there, wants to be at home, all of that stuff, and she's a great coach who has it has just taken this Connecticut team to the semifinals and has a lot of, good stuff, makes sense. So that is the kind of thing that we're guessing right now with Connecticut and Indiana and the reasoning behind that. But I do want to, I know Jamie has a little bit of a theory about like how long some of these things are going to take. When I say some are going to go really quickly or higher, I do think like Indiana, Connecticut is something like that. But yeah, I really like agree with the fact, Tyler, that you said like, this is the moment. Like, you have Golden State coming in next season. We didn't even add the fact that Toronto and Portland also
they're searching right now as we speak. They're searching.
It's still like a little early, but also like it is a thought, especially with all of these vacancies. I can, I know a bit of the personnel in Toronto a little bit better than I know who's running Portland. And like, I know the idea is definitely probably to see what the landscape is and go with it. So yeah, that's technically 9 teams that are looking for a coach right now. And then you also have all of these like very great assistants coming up in the WNBA assistant coaches. You have a lot of these head coaches that now don't have homes. And so I do think some of the pieces are going to fall quickly. And it's going to be a huge culture shift as well, because we are expanding. There is so much going on in the league right now. But Jamie, going into your thoughts, I know that like, and it's so interesting that we have you because like you have such like a unique perspective on coaching itself, because your mom is a wonderful coach and has been for your entire life. So I'm curious about, because you know a little bit more about the inner workings of how these conversations happen to hire coaches. So what are your thoughts on what Tyler said about this moment right now that we're in? And curious to hear your theory about these hirings.
Yeah, so when a lot of dominoes started falling, there were rumors coming into this postseason that there were going to be a lot of moves made as far as coaching. I don't know that anyone could have really anticipated how many moves would be made, how many new head coaches we would be seeing right now. But something that I kind of put out there, and this was before even the 2 most recent, I think this was as we got to maybe 4 or 5 head coaching vacancies. I said, hey, you guys have to remember the pool for WNBA coaches is somewhat limited by the timing of these moves, because it's almost impossible to get a college head coach to jump from college to the WNBA based on the timing of these decisions being made. Because if you are really a head coach anywhere, but especially an elite high-level head coach, you aren't usually going to be someone who's going to leave your team right before the NCAA season starts. And you're probably not going to be going into a situation where you're coming into a job with like a month or 2 to go before the season, which is what would happen if you're being hired after the season. And so I had, some back and forth with some people talking about it. And I had someone say, well, you can just hire them after the NCAA season. Well, in theory, sure, you could, but then you're going through basically the entirety of free agency without a head coach. So how do you decide? Absolutely. Yeah, that's in like a normal season. That's not even talking about this year where you have an expansion draft. And so it's really difficult to say, yeah, we're going to be setting ourselves up for future success by not having a coach for this whole time period. However, this season, you have the CBA that the players have already announced they are going to opt out of. And so that means that you have 2 players in the entirety of the league that are signed to guaranteed contracts after 2025. That means if you have a down year this year, if you're a little bit directionless this year, if you maybe go, 8-9 months without a head coach because you're waiting around to see if you can get a college coach to maybe jump, you have 1 year. You have one down year. Maybe you get better positioning for the draft, and then you have someone who can really lead you into the future alongside the fact that you have 2 franchises that have a full year to prepare, and so they can sit around and they can wait until next summer and say, hey, college coaches, how would you like this entire year on our payroll to prepare, to plan for your expansion draft, to start figuring it out, and you aren't leaving your team completely in the lurch. So we are at a unique opportunity to make these massive moves that can change the entire trajectory of your franchise at a time when you need to be able to do that, and you need to be putting yourself on the best trajectory possible, and you are uniquely positioned to do so. So I do think that there are going to be some franchises, some openings that very well could stay open for the entirety of the college season, because I really do think that there's some that that will just say 2025 wash. Who cares? We need a good coach.
Hey, I feel you. I also think one thing that kind of similar to what you said in the aspect of like, hey, you can have a year, you can come not chill, but like, you know, like we plan for a year. I also, and not that I have like any lead on this or anything, but more just a curiosity. I'm interested in seeing if the idea of job security by being at an expansion franchise where you get this year to plan, and then presumably you're going to get 2 to 3 years as you know, the understanding of an expansion franchise isn't, you better come in and win now. You know, that's not what you're looking for. So I would even be interested in seeing from the W coach's perspective.
Yeah.
If that is an enticing factor where it's like, you know, Chelsea, you listed almost like every coach damn near had 2 years, you know, or less. You know what I mean? So like the idea that presumably you could go to a Portland, you could go to a Toronto and have at minimum, I'd say 3 years, you know, like if you count this year coming up and then at 2 seasons, you know, and I would like to think at least 1 more year, just in the sense of how expansion franchises and the kind of the expectations that go into that, you know, I'd be interested on the W side to know if that would be something that just that kind of added buffer of at least an extra year to be employed, you know, and to see how that would potentially have an impact on W coaches, you know, being cool with taking this year off and from, you know, being on an active playing team and to get that extra year. That's I don't, like I said, no lead on that or anything, but I'm curious to see if that plays into it at all.
I also, that's such a great point. And I do think maybe if we were talking about this like 2-3 years ago, the argument has always been that like college coaches probably aren't going to jump to the WNBA, one, because of job security. I do think job security is a bigger thing in college than it is in the WNBA. There's less coaching turnover. It's more of a trend for coaches to be at a college for their entire career. I mean, there's so many that we can talk about that have done that. But I do think these WNBA franchises are more willing to like throw coaches at the bag now. And I think that's more of a thing because like a couple of years ago, people would have been like, no, they're not giving up the money and the security that they have in college. And the fact that college players are very different to coach. Like Don Staley always says, like, I'm not leaving because this is not about basketball. This is about like building these young women into like members of society. And like, that's great. Like if that's what you want to do, go for it, because you have more, I wouldn't say control, but they're more influenceable. I don't think that's
I think that's always kind of been the aspect with college coaches is it's just different, you know, and like
you're developing them as people more.
And that's across all college sports.
And there's some coaches that are really, really into that, and there's some that truly are just like, I want X's and O's, I don't really care about the rest of it. And so that's why I think we're going to see there will maybe be some unexpected college coaches that could get an opportunity at the next level for that reason, as well as, you know, historically there's been the resources and you don't have your own training facilities, you're having to take public planes and things like that, but that gap is narrowing. And so are we going to see, you know, the top of the top jumping? Almost definitely not. But you are going to, in my opinion, see at least a Power 5 coach probably go to the WNBA. I just think that's coming.
I could see it. I also think if I was to guess, I would rip. And my guess is honestly, I'm looking at the assistant coaches because I think like, time. And we just saw it with Natalie going from the Aces to Golden State. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some other Aces coaches going, you know, Like Tyler Marsh
Tyler
is fantastic.
Yep.
And we saw, I believe it was Kareem Copeland from Washington Post was reporting when Washington's news was kind of coming out that they were looking like it doesn't have to be inside the WNBA. And we just saw that with Phoenix as well, taking an NBA assistant coach and making the jump over. So I'm sure they're looking at W benches. They're looking at NBA benches. They're looking at college benches. So that's where I could, for sure, and so that's where I'm interested in seeing the pace of this, because I think absolutely head coaches for college teams, 100%, like you kind of have to wait that out, presumably. Assistant coaches, they might just dip.
Not a fair game.
Yeah, so like
if you give them a good enough offer,
exactly, like
it's fair game.
and I mean, if you get a head coaching position, obviously, like it's
it's easier to interview assistant coaches in season, and they can say, "Yeah, I'll come after the season," and their head coach probably won't have a problem with that either. Like you have a lot fewer obstacles if you're talking to assistant coaches. Plus, we haven't even brought in the fact that you're bridging some of the gap in differences between the W and college, because college now also has NIL and all that coaches are contending with, and so they could very well be thinking, well, I'm dealing with this. I'm dealing with this. The rules are really confusing. We have conference realignment. And so at a certain point, some of those detractions from the W, they just don't really hold as much water anymore.
Yeah. I do think that all goes back into like, this is such an important time for these people, these teams to be hiring coaches. And I think it's going to be so interesting to see who, I think like, there is definitely obviously more of a timeline with these teams that obviously are going to play next season. I think Toronto and Portland are in a fantastic position right now to kind of wait for the water to settle and really pick someone that like they are 100% like bought in to the system. And like, I know personally that like Toronto's still very early in the process. Like I can probably like list the people who are currently employed by this Toronto team. Like it's a very small
for sure.
Now. For sure. So they still need GMs, which is a thing with current teams too. Yep. And so it's a process, but I do think that having that intentional time to pick someone and like you said, have job security next year, to travel to all the different teams to see where the expansion, because the expansion draft next year is interesting because we have 2 teams instead of 1. So it's going to be more of a little bit of a battle. But I do want to talk a little bit more about the current coaching vacancies that we have. Some of them are bottom lottery teams. Some of them are literally teams that were in the playoffs. Who knows if we're done with coaches and teams fighting? There's still a few that are up in the air. So I'm curious for you two. And obviously there's so many we can't go down the list and talk, but I'm curious what you think maybe the biggest hiring move is going to be, or like if you have one in mind that you're like, this person is going to this place.
I have one that I really like. And it's and I am and kind of I'm interested in seeing how much of the coaches that got like fired or parted ways with, however they want to word it, like how many of those just can be kind of shuffled around versus new opportunities. One coach that I would love to get another shot is Latricia Trammell, and I would love to see her in Chicago. I think that just makes so much sense to me. The way that, like, I was surprised to see her fired, to be quite honest with you, because I thought they were going to kind of just chalk this year up to injuries, and I thought it was a pretty, just unlucky hand that she was dealt. But what we saw 2 seasons ago now, where her first year, where Arike buys in on the defensive end like we have never seen before, where they make the playoffs and Satu has her best season yet. Like these are all these different things. And we've seen her work with bigs now. We've seen her emphasize defense. And I, as someone who went down to Dallas to cover on many occasions, the relationship with the players seemed great. So it kind of still has like similar vibes to kind of what Spoon was bringing in that way, but also, just a little bit more experience and maybe just a different touch on it as opposed to what Spoon was putting on the job. And like I said, I still don't, the reason behind the firing is still up in the air, but it's open now. And I think Spoon, like, you have a guard. Let me see if this sounds familiar. You have a guard who is very good offensively that needs the freedom to be very good offensively. And you have some very good, talented bigs that are buying in on the defensive end. Arike and Kennedy, Camilla and Angel, and then Satu and Tierra McCowan. Like, it's different styles for sure, but it seems pretty plug and play in the sense of how you can kind of see it functioning. So that, and then Kurt Miller to Atlanta is also just another one I want to see, just because a veteran-led team. He's had success in the postseason, getting deep into the postseason that Atlanta hasn't been able to find. That's just kind of I kind of feel like an easy, like, we need to level up. You have leveled up before. Let's try this out. Like, it doesn't really go much deeper than that, honestly. It just kind of makes sense to me. So those are the two that immediately, stick out as potential ones for me.
Yeah, I love that. And I agree. I'm still so upset about the Teaspoon Chicago firing. Because I just, one, she only had a season. You have so many new people. And then also the fact that she still has a fantastic relationship with your franchise cornerstone star that you
hanging out in New York
as much as possible. And she has this wonderful relationship with Angel, who very clearly needs a good mentor to help her, maintain, or not maintain, but balance all of this stuff that she's going through.
Just navigate everything. Yeah.
Navigate everything. And then you I could talk about that all day. I will say selfishly, I do want Teaspoon to come to Toronto. So that's my dream scenario.
See, it might work out for you.
Yeah, we'll see how that works out. I do think Teaspoon has a great idea, because obviously she was around in the early days of New York and how to build a good team culture, and obviously was building a great team culture in Chicago. And I do think that's important for an expansion. I also think, Toronto's a fun place to be, and we have a very kind of unique and diverse kind of community here.
You didn't get you on the pitch.
I know, right?
We both need to be on the tourism boards for our respective areas.
Exactly.
I got nothing for Oklahoma, so don't. don't put me
I
on
said
the board.
both and not all three.
Don't put me on no board.
But yeah, I do think that Toronto, based on what I've seen with the Raptors, and I know the women's and men's basketball communities are different, but it's a very unique place in that you're coaching a team that represents an entire country. I know this is kind of a weird narrative of Canada's team and blah blah blah, but at the same time, it's a lot different than coaching for a city. You're coaching for a very wide community, and having someone like Teaspoon, who has NBA experience, WNBA experience, played in the WNBA, is very likable. I think it's a good face to have for the team. So that's my dream hiring. Jamie, very curious to think if you have any ideas for these current openings, and if you think, other than the ones that we kind of think are somewhat in stone based on reporting, but very curious.
Yeah, I do. The thing with Teaspoon is that I completely agree. I loved her relationship with her players, especially Angel, things like that. There's been some interesting little comments from some of the other players in the franchise that maybe there was some sort of a split in the locker room where some really responded to her coaching style.
That's kind of what I was getting with with LT, where it's it might just be a different touch on it.
And so that's really tough, especially when you're in year one, when you're coming into a mostly constructed roster. And so I think that there's this kind of narrative that if a coach isn't the right coach for someone, that for some reason that automatically makes them a bad person or a bad coach. And I so categorically disagree with that, which obviously I'm a coach's kid, but I've seen people thrive in one system and really struggle in another. I've seen people really struggle in one system and make a transition and do great. And I've also seen people that, in my experience at Iowa State, they coach hard. They're going to really hold you to a high standard. And sometimes when you're a college student, you don't love that. But so many times, even the people that really butt heads with the coaches will come back a couple years down the line and say, wow, I am so glad I stuck it out. It made me so much better as a player, as a person. And so that's part of why I have this just fundamental disagreement with those narratives where you can pluck specific experiences for specific players with coaches and try and say, well, that makes them a bad coach. No, it just means they weren't the right coach for that person. And so I would love to see all that to say, I would really like to see Teaspoon get another job. I think that your argument for Toronto is a really great one. I do think that it's tough when you don't have as much longevity at that WNBA level, at the head coaching level. I would anticipate that they would want a lot of head coaching experience. Not that that would necessarily be a must.
Yeah, that's fair. No,
but
I want to say before we move on from the teaspoon thing is that I think a lot of people don't understand that like the job of an assistant coach is a very different role than a head coach. And yes. I definitely have a lot of empathy for making that switch because I do, based on like, and Jamie, correct me if I'm wrong, but like I feel like assistant coaches, of course, they all have their different assignments of like whether they're, you know, organizing the defense or the offense, or this or that or whatever, right? And the head coach obviously has to oversee it all and make sure that the team culture is there. So I do think going from that a little bit more like individualistic role of an assistant coach, where you're trying to build these one-on-one relationships with every single player, develop them in a very specific way, then going immediately into a head coach where it's less of a role to do those individual one-on-one. You obviously want to have those, but you also want to develop a team culture together with your coaches, with your team, whatever. I do think that that's like a very interesting switch to make. And I do have a lot of empathy for like having to make that switch very quickly. And so these things that you're saying about like maybe the Chicago locker room, that just kind of screams to me like growing pains of turning from an assistant coach into a head coach. So that's very interesting to like think about, but continue on with your point.
No, you're 100% right. I mean, there's a reason why my mother's been an assistant coach and an associate head coach for her entire career. It's not because she hasn't been offered head coaching jobs. Like, okay, when I was in high school, I found that out and I was like, why would you never take a job? Why would you never take a head coach job? You do so great. Now, as an adult, I understand because it is a completely different job. She thrives on those individual relationships with the players, and that's what a lot of assistants do. And so for Teaspoon, I absolutely think she can grow into it. I just think that for specifically expansion franchises, because of the options available to them, I wouldn't be surprised to see them try to really throw a bag at someone with extensive head coaching experience because, you know, if you can set yourself up right off the bat, I mean, this can be a very long tenure. But I mean, that's not to say that I don't think she would do great. That's just how I would see it as someone running a new franchise. But I almost wouldn't hate if Teaspoon ends up going and being on an assistant for another couple of years in the W, to go and get some more of that experience, reacclimate a little bit after being in the NBA. Like, I think that she can go and she absolutely can be successful in the WNBA if she does get another head coaching position. And I'm not discounting that at all. But no matter what, like, I want her on a bench this coming year is mostly what I'm getting at. Like, if she doesn't get one of those head coaching jobs, I desperately hope she goes. I know that New York's a really popular
could be Vegas. Her and Becky.
Why not? Just get a little bit more of that experience. Take a little bit of that pressure back off yourself and develop. And I mean, this is going to be such a tough time to be a head coach as well. And so there wouldn't be the worst time to even say, I'm going to go be an assistant for another year, knowing that there's going to be more shuffling. And so that's my biggest one that I just really would like to see continue coaching in the W specifically. Beyond that, you know, it's there's so much that's all up in the air. I do think that we feel pretty confident about where Stephanie White's going. I feel extremely confident that Kurt Miller will land somewhere. I really wouldn't be surprised to see Latricia Trammell get another shot somewhere. Beyond that, I don't really know how many of them I would think are probably going to still land somewhere. Again, they may do the kind of classic end up back on a bench as an assistant, move their way back up. That's just what we've seen so much in the W. But just with the unique situation right now, I think we're probably likely to see a lot of those more external hires. I don't like it. I think there's probably going to be at least one more coach coming over from the NBA that doesn't have any head coaching experience, that doesn't have any experience coaching women. I frankly despise that. It's different. Coaching men, coaching women is different. They're different games. And so
different games, different players, different
players.
And I think that because Phoenix,
but they're going to do it.
I think Phoenix, like, it wasn't a disaster, you know, like just on the court wise. And I think that
is not a disaster, but did not reach the potential they very well could have.
Yeah, but you're not wrong. So, but I think what I'm getting at is like, I don't think it was bad enough to deter anyone from doing it.
Yeah. But I do think, on the other hand, I do think there are people. I think there are a couple assistants in the W that are definitely going to get good looks. Again, we said Taylor Marsh before, like very high-ranking assistant coach for the Aces. We already
Smith.
Yeah,
Up us with the links. She's head coach.
Yeah, I'd be more shocked than not if Smith doesn't end up as a head coach somewhere.
I saw her name thrown around for Connecticut.
I feel like she's been at like every team should be interviewing. To me, should be interviewing both Katie Smith and Tyler Marsh. And I'd be shocked
should be the easiest.
Like at least put them on the schedule for the interviews. And
exactly.
like if I'd be shocked if honestly I wouldn't be surprised if both of them got it. But definitely Katie Smith feels like one that is bound to happen.
And like we already saw Natalie Nakase go from the Aces. She was the top ranking assistant coach for the Aces. She's now with Golden State, which I think with a coach like Becky Hammond, who obviously this year was different, but has had such a successful 3 years, her coaching tree is just going to start going everywhere.
Oh yeah. It's
I would love to see Teaspoon back with her. I would love to see, it's just like, there's so much potential in the WNBA in terms of coaching that like, I'm going to say why go to the NBA, but like I do understand there are definitely a couple, associate head coaches, high ranking assistant coaches there that are also good options. There are like, I think about like, I just know Toronto better than most NBA teams, but like, I know there's a few coaches on that side that would be fantastic WNBA coaches eventually. We actually have one who was a WNBA player. Her name's Mary Andrade. I wrote a story about her. But I think she would be such a fantastic coach in the WNBA as well. So like, there's so many different, I know we kind of hate the, like, you get a man to whatever, but there are coming up in the NBA that like,
ew, man.
Was one, ew, man. Yeah.
I'm right there with you.
Do you think that there's a few that went that route to like be in the NBA that could potentially move to the NBA eventually? So I do understand the thing of like saying like, bringing these NBA coaches is bad. I get it. But like, there is also a few women up in that space who I would love to see transfer over. So there's just, we could go on and on. There's so much to talk about when you think about coaching.
We'll come back to it.
I'm going to throw one dark horse out right now.
Let's go.
Chrissy Tolliver.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Oh, I mean, easy.
Coaching the NBA is now on the Mercury staff. Easy. Obviously, like hasn't been coaching for a super long time, but could be even seen as a plus, to be honest.
Yeah.
So that is one name that I'm very interested in seeing.
I love her to Washington. I love that idea.
I'm very interested in seeing if her name gets floated around.
As soon as I saw someone mention it, I was like, oh, sold.
Yeah. At least some interviews for sure, because it makes sense.
A couple of them, like Jamie said, may take a little bit of time, but we have the lottery draft coming at the end of the month. We have the expansion draft coming on December 5th or 6th. I can't remember the exact date. And then you have a very important free agency coming in January. So some of these teams are definitely going to start hiring pretty quickly. And it's just going to be very interesting to look at where the chips fall or whatever the saying is. But with that, I mean, some are going to be fast, some are going to be slow. I don't think
there's a lot of in between. It's like you said, Tyler, no one wants to be in the middle of the pack. No one wants to just like wait until after the important stuff like the expansion draft, but not just like wait it all the way out. Like it's either going to happen fast or we're going to be like sitting here tapping our toes, except for we're not, because we're going to be talking about college.
Look, don't worry. I'll be here. Whenever they make the decision, I'll be here. Y'all just say the word, W.
3 GM vacancies I think are of utmost importance to fill first, because those are the people who are going to be working to hire the head coaches, are going to be working to try and get free agents there. Of course, you can't get free agents very invested without a head coach, but you need those GMs, especially when you think about expansion draft. But like I was saying at the very beginning of this, it's such a changing time in the WNBA. It's so hard to predict where we're going in terms of like priorities and culture and these stars coming in. I do want to kind of transfer and talk about college a little bit, because as we start talking about next year in the WNBA, obviously you have to think about college because we have such an exciting draft. And I know it's so far to be talking about the draft, but you have so many exciting players in college.
It's time. We're here.
Who are about to start their season, and opening is on Monday, November 4th. I think Jamie said there's like 160 something.
Too many games, but also never enough.
Games on day one,
but also never enough.
Shout out to Mark Schindler, because I know he's probably going to watch like at least most of them, like 155 of them if he can. He has great college coverage, so shout out to him. But it's so exciting to think about. As much as we're changing with the WNBA, I think this is such a crucial season for college. And I'm curious what games you two are most excited to watch on Monday. And I know we all have our different ties with, colleges and conferences and whatever. I'm a free agent, but it's fine. I'm curious, what's one matchup on Monday that you're so excited to see? And then also, just a little side, I know we're coming out with these lists and all of this stuff for preseason. Throw out one player, and just one, I want to try and make it hard, that you think is going to have a breakout season this year. Ooh. Not to the Caitlin Clark level, obviously, because that was extreme, but
I got a couple for you.
That you think is going to make a name for themselves in college this year. So I'll start with Jimmy. Your most exciting matchup for Monday, and someone you think is going to make a name for themselves in college this year.
Sure. So for Monday, gosh, I have lines and lines of games that I have on my schedule to watch for Monday. For one, it right off the bat, games start at 10 a.m. Central and then go through the entire day. At 11, I'm calling Iowa State hosting Chicago State. So that will affect my schedule a little bit. But I'm really, really excited to see UCLA at Louisville. As someone who absolutely adores post play, I am so excited. True. Yes. You're so right. I had it written down as the fact that Louisville's the home team, but I totally forgot that's the Paris game. Good call. Cool. So UCLA, Louisville, I want to see a big evolution for the way that Lauren Betts is used. Obviously, she was tremendous last year. She was really efficient, but I still think that she could have been used in a lot better ways at times. So I'm really excited to see that. Louisville definitely has some different looks to them, and so really excited just to see kind of how that is. It's one of 2 top 20 matchups that day, so I think that one will be really, really fun. As far as a breakout player, gosh, it's really hard. I obviously am a personal fan of the Athletics pick for this year, which is that they did in fact shout out Addie Brown from ISU as a breakout player. Again, I've said it a million times on every platform that I've ever been on, but she's so massively underrated for the season that she had last year. And it just kind of blows my mind that she's not talked about more. But I also think that for Baylor, if they're going to really reach what their potential could be, it's kind of weird to me that I'm not seeing Dariana Littlepage-Buggs mentioned in a lot of conversations naturally.
Come on!
So I think it's really odd, honestly. I think she has more than earned that recognition as a junior. She can be a 4. She's shown that she can play basically everywhere on the floor. She has a great name, so she has a deal with Raid. Please, she has
that's DLG.
Every
Come
piece.
on,
she has a deal with Raid because her last name is Littlepage-Buggs. So
that's so funny.
I think that it's crazy that she's not talked about more on a team that has a lot of returning production. I think that she and frankly Bella Fauntleroy as well should have a big step forward. I've been a huge fan of hers the entire time she's been at Baylor, so I think that that's a duo that could really make some noise alongside the other returners they have and adding Aaron Conley. But no. My pick is Dariana, but I think that she and Bella can really help each other. They can both lift each other up more than either individually.
Love that. Okay. So Paris game, and we're talking some Baylor duo action. Tyler, see if you can pick a different game for opening.
Can I pick? Is it bad just to pick the other Paris game because we get Ole Miss USC? That is a fantastic the French are getting treated nice. They got real hoops. They got real hoops in Paris. I mean, come on, the additions to this USC roster this season. That first Kiki Iriafen and Juju Watkins pick and roll. Man, I might have tears in my eyes. It's gonna be so beautiful. It's gonna be incredible basketball. So I'm just super excited to see it's just what this looks like, and especially because I think we're gonna get a different style of USC basketball this year in the sense of I can't wait to see Juju Watkins the playmaker, and I'm so incredibly excited by that because I don't think it was a skill set issue of her not playmaking. I just think it was a system there was like, with all due respect to the USC players, I think they had some incredible players around Juju that were great in their role. Not many times in possessions, especially as you get down to the wire at the end of the shot clock, do you want someone else besides Juju Watkins taking the shot? Mm-hmm. You got Kiki Ariafa next to you now. You got Talia Von Olhoffen next to you now. Like, these are players that
you got like a bunch of the best freshmen in the country.
Like,
that you're gonna be developing.
Class. Like, your number one class is your depth, not starting, not like not that's your depth. And so just the ability to see Juju have players around her that she should feel more comfortable playmaking to is going to be very exciting to me. And maybe that's not something we see immediately. Maybe that's a growth thing. Maybe it is something we see from the very first place. So I'm really excited to see that part of her game grow in that way. And for breakout players, I think I mentioned Talia Scott last time during the All-American preseason stuff. And I understand she was not on a great team. I understand that she was injured at times. There's still no reason that Talia Scott should not be mentioned with the top freshmen in the country.
Yep.
She is right there. Average, I think it was like 20-plus points last season. She transfers to Auburn now from Arkansas, which is still a team, like, I think it's a better team, but still a team that she should be the dominant scorer on to me.
The centerpiece, for sure.
Absolutely. And I can't wait to see her and break out. And well, she gave me one player. I got another one too. Just real quick, I promise. I'll be quick.
Okay.
Zay Green, now at Alabama.
Yes.
From UAPB, has been in the SEC before at A&M, or Tennessee, then A&M, excuse me. And she was phenomenal. When it's just been a matter of being able to play, whether it be due to transfer stuff, whether it be due to injury. Like, there's just different factors. And I could absolutely see her, even though like she's been playing, I think, since 2019 she's been in college, so it's been a long time of COVID years and transfer stuff, and there's been so many different factors, and this now feels like the moment for Zay Green to just officially introduce herself to the nation, and I think play her way into a WNBA draft pick. I really think that's a very real possibility.
Yeah.
And she seems like a phenomenal, like, late first round, early second round draft pick for a team that can make a roster and be like a genuine player in the W. So that is a player that I'm going to be looking forward to. Like, she averaged 16, 7, and 5 across the board last year. Like, that is an all-around solid player that can kind of do a little bit of whatever you need. And I'm super excited to see her on a team like Alabama.
Yeah, that's awesome. My game that I'm so excited to watch on Monday is Michigan, South Carolina.
Yep.
One, because defending champions, going to be so nice to see how they kind of recoup after losing Camilla. And kind of what that looks like now. But then for me, which kind of taps into my breakout player.
Yeah, get the flag.
Raise the flag.
Mm-hmm.
I am so excited to see Silas Swords out there. Like, when you think about a freshman who is already an Olympian, has been for the last year playing with the best players, not just in college, best like young players in the world. She has been playing with the best players in the entire world. Like, and she was getting minutes at the Olympics. Like, she wasn't getting garbage minutes. Sila was getting minutes, like real minutes, and holding her own. She's so versatile. She has size as a guard. Her driving is like, she's fast. She can defend. She has a great shot. And I just I'm so excited for the world to discover Sila Swords. I have so much faith in her ability to grow now in the NCAA. She's finally playing with players that are around her age and around her similar skill set. And then they go and hire Natalie Achanwa as an assistant coach, who has now been her mentor for the past 3 years on Team Canada, which is a brilliant choice for assistant coaching. And I just think that Sila is someone that is very quickly going to get on people's radars. I do she has 4 years now in college. And I just think that and Michigan's a great place for her because they're literally Ann Arbor's on the Canadian border. They're going to have people coming down. I just think that she has such a bright future, and she's already accomplished so much going into college. An Olympian, she played on both Olympic qualifying tournaments. Canada had 2 before they got to the Olympics. She was on both. She was literally on the plane doing her chemistry homework, going to an Olympic qualifying
Crazy
tournament.
Are you sure you're a free agent? It kind of sounds like you have a team. I don't know. Well,
but yeah, she's my breakout player. I'm just like, you all know that I'm really into the Canadians, but like this kid's special. And what? Oh my God, shocking. I'm so into, yeah. But yeah, once you see how, and like, if you go back and watch her on like the All-American team, high school obviously is a little bit different. Her dad is also a coach too, which I think is like a factor. Her dad played on the Canadian Olympic team in 2000 with Steve Nash and Rowan Barrett Sr. and all those like really like big guys. Like, this kid has been getting primed. And the scary part is that her sister is 2 years younger than her and is at the same level.
Yeah. No, they're tough. They're both tough. Yeah.
They're so tough. So get ready for the Swords family to kind of knock you off your college socks over here. And that is my rant for the day on Canadians. But we are obviously also excited for the college season to start. Obviously still going to be getting into the WNBA because it never stops. We have Unrivaled coming out, which they're almost done with their roster.
We'll have Athletes Unlimited still releasing.
Athletes Unlimited, like their women's basketball is a year-round
sport. Year round.
Dull. We are going to have so much to talk about. So this one went a bit long because the three of us know how to yap. When it comes to coaches in college, the three of us can yap. So tune in next Tuesday. We'll probably go over some of the stuff that happened on opening in college. We are getting into the college season, and the college season, again, just never stops. It's going to be so fantastic. So make sure to tune in. Subscribe to Her Hoop Stats so you can get our episodes when they come out. Follow us each on Twitter. We all have our handles if you're watching on YouTube. And also check out our full slate of Her Hoop Stats, other podcasts. Screen and Calvin obviously always have some fun stuff. The Hoopin' Podcast. There's just so much coming out on Her Hoop Stats. So make sure to tap in. But we had a great week talking about all of the fun, spicy details. But thanks for joining us. I'm Chelsea. Obviously, we have Tyler and Jamie here. Until next week, thanks for joining the Press Break Pod.